When last we looked, Papa Izzo had installed Orzo's porch, and Orzo had gotten a chance to lounge about inside of it. Since then, Papa Izzo has put a nice hanging basket on the porch as a beautiful ornamentation, and so that he stops banging his head on the porch whenever he mows.
Just because a DIY project is finished doesn't necessarily mean it's done. And Papa Izzo's garden is the best example of this. So this is the backyard of Mom and Papa Izzo's house. We've got the driveway over here with a garage, nice 2-car garage that's possibly falling down. We've got the house, and we've got a cute little shed where Papa Izzo keeps his lawnmower and his snow blowers and all of that good stuff. Now, originally, when Papa Izzo bought the house, there were fence on the front and the back, and a nice chain link fence around the side. And he decided he wanted to plant a garden to get nice, fresh zucchini and tomatoes and peppers. So what he did was he built himself a 25-foot by 25-foot garden in the back. And it was beautiful, and it was wonderful, and Papa Izzo saw that it was good, and so did the deer. And the deer came, and the deer ate much of the garden. And unfortunately, here in the city limits, it is illegal to shoot a gun, even if it is at a deer that is threatening your vegetables. So, Papa Izzo rebuilt the garden, and what he did was he decided to put a small fence around the vegetable patch. So he's got a nice small fence so that the deer wouldn't eat it. Unfortunately, the deer started leaping the fence. So what he did was on the shed, he put a nice motion sensor. And this motion sensor saw all of the garden. And what would happen is if you got near the garden, you would trip the motion sensor. And there was a bucket in the middle of the garden. And inside the bucket, there was a fan and a light. And the light would start glowing. Whenever the deer tripped the motion sensor, the light would start glowing and the fan would start, and there were tin pie plates inside of the bucket, and when the fan started, it would rattle and make this awful noise, and it would glow, and of course that terrified the deer and they ran away. Now, due to some questionable circumstances, we do believe it was sabotage, the motion sensor was knocked askew, and half of the garden got eaten. The half that was not covered by the motion sensor. So, after that, Papa Izzo decided to do things a bit differently. The next year, he shortened the garden, made it a bit smaller, and put massive, like 7-foot high walls on this garden. This fence was intense and it was scary. And when the deer leapt into the backyard, they looked at that fence and they just walked away. And everything was good and the vegetables were saved until the groundhog showed up. And the groundhog burrowed in, and the groundhog ate poor Papa Izzo's vegetables. So, Papa Izzo replanted everything, and he decided to put about a 2 to 3 foot net just on the bottom of the garden, so it would lay flat on the garden, so that when the woodchuck came, he would poke his head up on that netting, assume that the entire patch was netted, and would walk away. And he did for a good part of the season. And then he just learned to burrow in a different place. So, the next year what Papa Izzo did is he cut his vegetables in half, and he only planted half of the vegetables. And he did a nice checkerboard throughout the garden. So anywhere that wasn't vegetables was guarded by this poultry netting in the hopes that that would trick the woodchuck. And it did. It tricked that woodchuck, and everything was great until the woodchuck burrowed in further and found that if he went up under the roots of one of the plants, he was safe to then eat all of the plants in the general vicinity. And the woodchuck, of course, outsmarted Papa Izzo that season. But it was the end of the season. So the next season, Papa Izzo decided to scrap everything. He's got the garden planted, walls made of netting, and along the back, he put an electric fence. So he put an electric fence back there. And so when the woodchuck came, and the woodchuck approached the fence, we had a fried woodchuck. In fact, what happened was he did ping pong between the electrified fence and the wooden fence, let out an unholy shriek. It was at 10 o'clock at night. It roused poor Papa Izzo from his bed. And the woodchuck, we had roasted woodchuck. It kept going back and forth through the gauntlet until Papa Izzo came down and shone a light upon him and said, "It serves you right, woodchuck. Leave my property." And the woodchuck dashed through the gauntlet one more time and up the 3-foot-high chain-link fence and scurried 20 feet into the neighbor's tree and sat there shivering. And Papa Izzo was vindicated for about a night, and then the groundhog found out that the other side was not electrified and rode in the other way. It was sad. Very sad for Papa Izzo, because that meant a lot of the vegetables got destroyed. And that is the story of the woodchuck. It is also the story of how the town of Irondequoit in Rochester, New York, found out that Papa Izzo had an illegal electric fence and wrote Papa Izzo a cease and desist order. And Papa Izzo is now cited in the town of Irondequoit because, turns out, shooting woodchucks and also electrocuting woodchucks illegal in the town limits. Very disappointing. Okay, so the next year what Papa Izzo did is he put up those beautiful walls and he put poultry netting all the way across, all under the garden, and he did raised beds and put the plants in the raised beds. And when the woodchuck came under the fence and he saw that and he tried to burrow in, he knew he could not get the vegetables, and so he ran away. And it has been thus since my memory. It has been all of the vegetables on lockdown under these guarded fences. It has been quite an intense experience for these poor tomatoes growing up in intense captivity. But that is what has to happen in order to save it from both the deer and the woodchucks. Funny story, however, recently he's had a chipmunk, and the chipmunk has been small enough to burrow under and find a weak spot in the poultry netting and chew a way into the poultry netting. And he, of course, samples each and every tomato because he does not like tomatoes, but he insists on sampling every single tomato in the garden just to make sure he does not like the tomatoes. Papa Izzo has thus decided to hang mothballs, and he will stuff mothballs anywhere he sees any holes in the garden, and that has kept the chipmunk at bay. So, just because a DIY project is completed doesn't necessarily mean there isn't room for improvement.
So this is what the garden looks like now, in real life. So, moral of the story, after making sure you take a nice nap, go back, check your work, and never be afraid to make alterations and improvements to your design.